Joining us from ESPN, their college football coverage on ABC and ESPN, and always a little NFL as well, it's good friend Booger McFarland. What's going on, man?
What's up, buddy? How we doing? I see you have the cut-off sleeveless shirt on. I'm assuming there was a workout previous, or there will be a workout post the taping of this.
Yeah, a bit of a disruption on the day, but we wanted to make sure we could make this happen. So little taping this morning, and then decided to get it in before I taped with you. So I just walked in the house, took off the hoodie, and was ready to go. So there you go.
I like it. Let's do
it. Okay. Timeline, so that you know. I picked Oregon in August because I was trying to be a little bit different as opposed to just picking everybody else. That, you know, sometimes you just go chalk, and then every now and then you're like, let me try something a little bit different. And so the first meeting, I actually felt probably better about Will Howard than I've ever felt. If you look at that game, Ohio State has the 2 fumbles. They have 8 penalties. There's the onside recovery, and then it's just kind of a mess there at the end. So Oregon escapes. We can get the guys that were available, not available, and all that kind of stuff. But look, anybody picking Oregon to win again after what we just saw in Columbus from Ohio State is a little scary. So go ahead. Who's your pick and why?
Well, I think the hardest thing to do is to have 2 really high-level performances back-to-back in college football, because like you're not dealing with professionals. You're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, and as soon as you have one good performance, they started feeling themselves, and everybody's patting them on the back. It's kind of hard to do it again because they're not used to doing it at that level all the time. With that being said, it was almost like Ryan Day told Chip Kelly, hey, listen, I know you like to run the football, but if you look outside, we got 3 guys that are professionals, one that probably could be the number 1 pick in the draft if he came out this year, and Jeremiah Smith. Let's throw the football to them. I know what your background is. I know you're Chip Kelly, you want to run the football, but let's throw this football out there. Even if they intercept 1 or 2, we're going to complete some, and that's going to put us in position. So I say all that to say this, Ryan. I think everybody in college football realizes that to me, the 3 most talented teams are Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon. And I think if you look at Ohio State, if they play to their ceiling, I don't think anybody can beat them. The problem is this: you're not going to get the consistent high-level performance from Will Howard all the time. I think we saw that this season. We saw the pick 6 against Penn State. We saw multiple picks in some games this season. We saw the pick against Michigan. And so here's what I would say. If you're Dan Lanning and you're Oregon, we got to beat them up front. Our defensive line has to dominate the football game. Dillon Gabriel is going to have to do what he did the second half of the season, which is use his legs a lot more, become a dual-threat quarterback. Now, he's never going to be Michael Vick. I'm not saying that. But he's got to be able to move the chains with his legs, and he started to do that at the end of the season. I like Ohio State in the game, but if you told me Oregon won the game, I can clearly tell you why they won it without even watching the game. They're going to win the game with their speed on the edges, their defensive line, and Dillon Gabriel is going to make some plays with his legs. If Ohio State's going to win this game, it's not going to be because of Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. It's going to be because Tate, Booger, Jeremiah Smith all had days, and Will Howard had 1 pick or less. That's how this game is going to be won. I don't know exactly which way I'd like. If you gave me some of that Ryen Russillo money, which way I bet. But if I'm betting my money, I'm going to Ohio State right now.
Yeah, it's just hard to see that team play that well against Tennessee, and on top of our expectations for Ohio State was when they're putting this roster together in August. So I'm with you on the Jeremiah Smith thing. Even if Michigan is showing you something entirely different than Tennessee's approach to go single coverage on the outside with their corners, they looked like they were the most miserable corners I've seen in a college football game all season long, because
it was cold, man.
Hey, man, I'm serious. Like, that made me go, maybe some of these teams would just be cold, because they look so bummed out. And guys, it's something you guys that played will always point out to me, when I was first getting started and watching football with you guys, like the guys that go down too often, the guys that don't want to get back up, are like, oh, hey, 14's down again. Here we go. And he's not out of the game. He's just having a bad time. And he's just going to sit there and be like, oh, no way. 5 is holding up everything. And, you guys on the inside are just like, get up and let's snap the football.
Yeah.
And I think Michigan clearly did a better job, but I think there was a little stubbornness in that approach in Ohio State in saying, we can push you guys around. And you're like, yeah, but there's 2 NFL first rounders on the interior, and that's like the only thing you wouldn't want to do against him. I was reading Bruce Feldman's piece, and that influenced a bit of some of the stuff that I'll talk about today because he has this piece up on The Athletic where he talks to coaching staffs that went up against all 8 of these teams, and it's really good stuff. And one coach in the Big Ten said, like, I think Ohio State's, clearly more talented on defense. And I read it and I thought, okay, Caleb's better than any 22, Caleb Downs is better than any single player on either defense. So I'd give you that. But with Jordan Birch back, I don't know that the defensive line for Ohio State feels like it's that much superior. If you want to go Ohio State, okay, fine. But I think the linebackers for Oregon are terrific. So I don't know that that's where this game is going to be decided before kickoff, some talent gap on that side of the football. Because again, watching it all year, I don't necessarily see it that way.
I think I would break the defense down like this. I think if you ask me about the front seven, I would take Oregon's front seven. And the primary reason why is this. I haven't seen the Jack Sawyer and the JT Tuimoloau I saw against Tennessee. I haven't seen them all year. Like, where have they been all season long? Now, I'll give them credit. They played probably their best game of the season against Tennessee, but that hasn't been the performances by those two all season long. I don't know if you'd agree with me on that one. So I would give the front seven edge to Oregon. The back four, I would probably give an edge to Ohio State, and mainly because of Caleb Downs. Like, he's phenomenal. Like, he can make up for a multitude of sins with those other guys. His football IQ on the back end, Russillo, is unbelievable, and I think he's just getting better. He needs to be around the football a lot more. So if I'm breaking down the two defenses, front seven, Oregon, because Birch is a load, and I've seen it consistently when he's healthy, more than what I've seen from the Ohio State front seven. Back end, I'll give the edge to Ohio State.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the way Ransom is used, you could argue he's just around there. And if you want to go with Sawyer and then Simon and start getting into it, I just don't think it's one of these traditional things. I think sometimes we have a really hard time with stereotypes too, years and years later, where you're just like, oh, Ohio State, they're cut from this cloth and they're going to play this way. And this has been a couple years with them where honestly the offensive line might have been the issue that we'd be more concerned with had we not seen just total domination against the Tennessee team that I thought was good going into that one. All right, the reason I want to stay kind of like from Oregon, Ohio State into Penn State is, like this one's just tough to figure out, or maybe it's really easy. I don't know who's going to pick Boise other than the Heisman army that became incredibly annoying for like you guys. You like I don't know if that's undergrad for Hoosiers fans or what, but it just like it got really anyway. Who gives a shit? I'm just going to keep moving on. Is there any version of you that sees Boise State figuring this one out?
No, because sometimes, man, football is not hard. Can we block them? I don't think Boise State can block the front four of Penn State. And if you're going to tell me that Boise State's going to line up and Ashton Genty's going to get 40 carries and he's going to get 300 yards, then I'm going to tell you, in what universe is that? I just don't know if you can line up and run the football against this team. And Ashton Genty's great. He's going to be a top 20 pick in the National Football League draft. But it's really not about him. Like, it's really about the other 10 on the field, the offensive line, the quarterback. I just don't know if he's got enough moxie and enough dudes on the outside to be able to test Penn State. And is he going to get time? Can they block Abdul Carter? I don't think so. So sometimes, like, this game is not hard, man. We try to complicate it and come up with this scenario where maybe if they get this, and understand this, turnovers and special teams are the great equalizer in football.
Sure.
So if Penn State turns the ball over 5 times, sure, anything can happen. But besides turnovers and 3 kickoff returns for touchdowns, I don't think there's any world where Boise State, by the end of the third quarter, is within 2 scores. I just don't. I just think it's going to be a mismatch in the trenches. And Bill Belichick always said this, Russillo, the job of a really, really good coach is to take away what you do best. Now, a lot of teams have tried to take away Genty. But something tells me, like Penn State, if you lose this game and Genty rushes for 350, I think James Franklin needs to be fired. Now, if you lose the game and somehow the quarterback has an unbelievable day and you get 2 pick sixes and 3 returns, okay, I can deal with that. But you, under no circumstances, can you let Genty go off. And I don't think James Franklin is going to do that. Again, I think Penn State wins, and I think they win rather comfortably.
Yeah, they both take care of the football if you look at it out average out over the entire season. You'd expect that they would because they've had good records and they're both really good teams within their conferences. The red zone scoring for both teams is terrific. The defensive red zone touchdown percentage stuff is really good for both of them. But I think there's one storyline that's being thrown in there to try to figure out a way to talk yourself into an upset or maybe this being close. And you're right. Like, if Aller just has a randomly bad day here, then next thing you know, we've got a fourth quarter. And that's what happens in the sport. But I've heard the Oregon game used as some template for what could happen here with Penn State. And I think it's really important to understand as somebody, who was on Oregon early and watched the Idaho game and watched the Boise game, that Oregon team was very weird on the offensive line for 2 weeks. They gave up 7 sacks combined in those first 2 games. They ran it for 3 yards to carry against Boise, 2.9 against Idaho. I mean, the Idaho game was really alarming for a team that you're going, I think it win a national championship. And from that point on, Gabriel got sacked 6 times total in the next 11 games, and they ended up 29th in the country in yards per carry. So it's not like top 5 yards per carry, but it's still really good from where they were. They had a weird 2 weeks with this offensive line, and credit to Boise for keeping it competitive there, but I don't think it's very fair to go week 2 of the college football season and look at that result and then apply it to what you think is going to happen against Penn State, because that was the time to get Oregon those first 2 weeks.
Well, no doubt. And you also have to understand this. It was so early in the season with some of the transfers that Oregon had, especially at the quarterback position. They were still trying to figure out, like, who's who? Like, what can you do? It's so early. Like, what does Dylan Gabriel really like? And then we can go through all the spring practices we want to, but until you get under live bullets where he steps across that white line and those coaches can't, you really don't know what type of guy you're going to get. Now, by now they do. And so it would be hard for me to go back to say, yep, let's go back. Let's get the Idaho game plan and implement that. And I think that's going to help us out. Like, I probably would. As a matter of fact, if you're a coach and you're going against Oregon or you're trying to look at Boise State, I'm not even looking at that game plan. Like, it was so long ago. Like, the players have changed, the game plans have changed. Most coaches, and I'm sure you've heard this because you've been around us long enough, when we're scouting, we're only looking at the previous 4 to 6 games. Because anything before that, like, things have changed. You don't know so much has changed. You're only looking at the previous 4, maybe even 6 games to kind of get an idea of what this team or what said player is doing right now.
Yeah, look, there's another way to look at the box score from that one too and say, the yards per carry thing's misleading because Jordan James got going in that one. You take out the Dylan Gabriel stuff, which always screws up some of the rushing numbers because of the way they do it in college versus the NFL. But
right.
I think another thing to look at too there is Maddox Madsen, the quarterback, the sophomore there. He doesn't turn the ball over, and when you think about Genty, you go, all right, well, they must just run it a million times. Like, they actually let that guy throw it. I mean, they run so many plays, so. That Penn State's just going to try to sell out. They probably don't necessarily have to stack the box as much because they're not going to be as freaked out by it. But if you think it's keeping Boise one-dimensional and them doing something they're not comfortable doing, they actually have thrown the football a lot this year too, despite the run that they've had. But it's just kind of hard to get there, especially with the talent on that defensive front for Penn State, because I love like 3 of those guys. All right, Texas, Arizona State. If you're going to get to Texas and rattle Ewers, maybe. The problem is, as much fun as this Arizona State team is, because I think they are a lot of fun to watch, they were last in the Big 12 in tackles for loss. The one thing you need to do to Texas, they do worse than anybody else in their conference.
Yeah, because if you want to rattle Texas, you got to make Quinn Ewers have happy feet. And I just don't know if Arizona State has the dudes up front that can get down with Kelvin Banks and some of that offensive line that Texas is going to throw out there. So defensively, I think Arizona State, if you look at what Texas has done in the 2 games they've lost, they've rushed for 31 and 29 yards. Now, that was against Georgia, but they rushed for 30 yards a game in the 2 games that they lost. In the other games, they're averaging about 190. So if you're Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham, you got to say, okay, Sark really wants to run the football because yours is not just chunking it down the field a ton. So whether it's Blue or whether it's Weisner, whatever it is, they want to run the football. So you're going to have to say, if Isaiah Bond is out or he's going to be limited, I'm going to take my chances with the other dudes on the outside one-on-one. I'm going to take the run away, and I'm going to see if I can hold up one-on-one. And I'm going to disguise and kind of make it. I'm not just going to line up and play man the entire game, but I'm going to disguise and take my chances against Wingo. He's a freshman, and some of these other guys on the outside. And then you got to hope on the offensive side of the football. Sam Levitt has a big day. I don't know. Jordan Tyson is kind of iffy to wide out. Scatterboo, I get it. And you can tell me this. I've been throwing this comp out all offseason or all postseason. Scatterboo to me is a comp between a Marshawn Lynch and a Toby Gerhart. So, like, if you kind of mix those two guys up, that's what you got in Cam Scatterboo. Like
the White Rhino.
Yeah. No question. Like, he's got tremendous balance. He's probably not going to run away from. He'll probably run 4.7 on a good day, but his contact balance is maybe the best I've seen in college football. I don't know if he's seen a defense the way he's going to see in Texas. So how does Arizona State get to, say, 28? Like, that's ultimately, if I'm Kenny D, like, I sat back and say, how do we get to 28 points? Because that gives us a chance. We're going to have to hit some big plays because I do believe the Texas secondary is vulnerable. I do believe Clemson showed us you can get them in the pass. If you can block them up front, you can make some plays in the passing game. So I feel a little bit better about Arizona State hanging than I do Boise State hanging, but I still don't feel great about Arizona State because of two reasons. I don't think defensively they're talented enough up front, and I don't know when you take Scatterboo away if they have enough else, especially with Sam Levitt, that they can scare Texas into kind of getting out of their game plan.
Yeah, and it hasn't really played out in his 24-5 touchdown interception deal, but Levitt can be an adventure. Like, it's a lot of fun, but I wouldn't say he makes Jennings look boring because nobody is that much of an adventure. And, look, it sucks. The 2 pick six right out of the gate. That was honestly, of all the things this past weekend, like an individual thing after watching his dropbacks. I cannot imagine playing offensive line for Jennings at SMU. I think after the first quarter,
he doesn't know how to step up. Like, he just keeps dropping back. Like, hey, dude, step up 3 steps. Jesus Christ.
If I were a tackle, like it was a 5th-year senior, I would just be turning around being like, there's no way. There's no way. Anyway, SMU's gone out of the picture. You don't need to do it. But just if you're tuning in for the first time with Levitt, it's a lot of fun, but it also could maybe scare the hell out of you. But it didn't really lead to the turnovers that maybe you'd expect it would. The way we've seen Texas look, although there's probably like 6 or 7 games, you look at some of the metrics, how consistently they underperform what their offensive expectation is. That gets back to the red zone issues. So maybe you look at it a little bit that, but I mean, it's Georgia that beat them twice, and Georgia's front is a little bit more impressive than Arizona State's, which I think we can all agree on. All right, last one here. Notre Dame, Georgia. The floor is yours.
Notre Dame, Georgia. Conventional wisdom says Gunnar Stockton, inexperienced quarterback, is not going to be able to have the same performance when he's got a little lead time as he did in the SEC title game when he was on the bench. Hey, Gunnar, get in. He goes in. He doesn't think a lot. I would probably agree with that, but I also would agree that they're going to come up with a game plan, Mike Bobo, to make sure he's comfortable. It's going to be a lot of quarterback run to kind of supplement the running game. I think they're going to throw the football down the field a lot. When you have an inexperienced quarterback, 2 things you do with him, Russillo. You throw a lot of screens and a lot of short passes, and you throw it deep. You don't allow him to throw from 10 to 20 yards across the middle of the field. You keep him out of that because there's usually a lot of bodies in there. It's either short or deep and not intermediate. I expect a lot of that. I think if you're Georgia, Georgia's front 7 has to dominate this game, okay? Because if they can dominate this game, Riley Leonard, man, like we've seen Riley Leonard, man, he will curl up a little bit now. And if he curls up, that Notre Dame offense is going to be one-dimensional, and it is going to be all Love and Price running the football. Leonard has got to make some plays in the passing game. He's got to push the football down the field to back this Georgia defense up. I'm interested to see the game plan. Everybody's hurt Georgia has ran on the edges, not up the middle with Stackhouse and those boys. It's been on the edges and the perimeter. So if you're Notre Dame, hey, success leaves clues, man. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Ole Miss showed you how to run the football. Everybody has showed you how to run the football. You attack the edges of this Georgia defense. I'm interested to see how motivated this Georgia team is without Carson Beck and what the game plan will be. I said on the show the other day, in the recent memory, and you tell me if you agree, this is the biggest game in the probably last 15 years of Notre Dame. Because, and here's what I mean by that. Most people think they should win this game.
Yeah, they have a chance. No, it's a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for those going, are you kidding me? A national championship against Alabama? Go ahead. Your point is valid.
Yes. The reason I'm saying is, if you knew that the national championship game against Alabama, they had no shot. Zero shot whatsoever. They have a legit shot based on circumstances to beat this Georgia team. And some people have them favored based on the health of these two teams. They can run the football, the momentum, who this game is against, where this game is. So when you factor all of that in, I think if you're Marcus Freeman, you got to take advantage of this situation. If Georgia loses, what does everybody say? They didn't have a quarterback, they weren't whole, blah, 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 blah. If Notre Dame loses, you kind of say, okay, if you can't do it now, then win. And so that's kind of what I mean by this. I'm going to favor Notre Dame because I just love how this team is built. They've gone against an SEC team before. They went into College Station, and I get it, A&M fell apart, but they went into College Station, and they dealt with that front four of A&M, which I think is going to have 2 or 3 guys get drafted. So that offensive line was young then. I think they're better now. They're going to understand how to deal with an athletic front. And it's just something about this Notre Dame team, man. And Georgia's not the same. Like Georgia, if you go back and look at, and I'm sure you're a big metrics guy, if you look at yards per rush over the last 4 or 5 years, like this Georgia team isn't like the Georgia defense we're used to seeing. And so I think Notre Dame can get them. I'm gonna favor Notre Dame in a close game, kick a field goal to win at the end. And some people are gonna look at it as an upset. I don't, because I think these two teams are pretty equal.
Yeah, look, Georgia doesn't have the skill guys that we're used to. We've covered that, whether it's the receivers or tight ends. And Etienne has been terrific. I like Nate Frazier a lot, but you're constantly worried about the ball being on the ground, which you saw in the SEC title game. And, the secondary is not till the standards, that you're used to. And the Stockton part of it is like, I don't know. I think he's actually been a little overrated, to be honest with you, in the lead up of what he actually did in that SEC title game against Texas. And if you look at some of the throw chart stuff, even that's probably not entirely fair because it's garbage time. So how much are they really asking him to throw in the other experience that he got? But there's really nothing there that's stretching a defense. And then I think about the secondary for Notre Dame that I like, which I've already mentioned with Klatt and other college football guests, and just going like, good luck getting separation with this group against those guys. So it's not like it's going to be these wide open windows where, Stockton's going to have to make some decisions here. But I think the Riley Leonard story, I couldn't tell if it was that because they weren't really playing anybody and they were smashing everyone and people had kind of written them off nationally after the Northern Illinois thing as like a real title contender. But he's been a different guy on the ground the second half of the season. Like he had some big output rushing games. And you think about him at Duke, like I've heard him compared to Haynes King a bunch of different times. I don't see that at all. I mean, look, if I had a son, I may name him Haynes King. That fucking guy is so tough. Yeah. And I think he's a little, well, I don't think he is. He is twitchier. It's not even a top speed thing. There's a foot in the ground and make you miss thing with Haynes King. And I thought he was going to die that night against Georgia anyway. So I've seen some people look at it as like, hey, Georgia, let's look at the quarterbacks that they've struggled with this year and a lot of these dual threat guys and different cats. And I'm like, well, Riley Leonard hasn't really been that. And honestly, the one thing Indiana did well was disrupt the passing game because of that D line. And Leonard averaged like 6 yards per attempt. So they didn't even get some like great Riley Leonard game to completely dominate Indiana. That would be the one unit that you probably felt good about. So I'm kind of going with Georgia's front, disrupting Leonard, and maybe in a low scoring game, finding a way at the end. But I don't think it's outrageous at all to be picking Notre Dame in this.
So remember this, when Mike Denbrock was the offensive coordinator at LSU, played Georgia in the SEC title game. Denbrock was the OC. All right? So Denbrock has familiarity going against Georgia. So Denbrock is now the OC at Notre Dame. He understands, like he's got a little understanding of this Georgia defense. So keep that in the back of your mind as we try to figure out the little schematic X's and O's. Denbrock understands what it's like to go against this Kirby Smart defense. So I think that could also give give Notre Dame a little edge.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, too, because I think some could argue that's why Milroe was so good against them.
Yep.
Because there were so many people that were comfortable with what Kirby was going to do. Go ahead.
And on top of that, if you go back and look at what, I forget his name, the Georgia Tech OC was with Kirby at Georgia, and they were scheming up Georgia in that Georgia Tech Georgia game. So to me, that was another point where if you understand what you're going to get from Georgia, you can scheme them up a little bit.
That's Buster Faulkner?
Buster Faulkner. Yes, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, he was at Georgia in 06, and then he was
Correct.
Georgia 2020 to 2022. Little
Yep.
Buster Faulkner for you, for the kids out there. All right, so we picked all those games. Give me your thoughts on Cam Ward with this Miami story. He plays half the bowl game, and we've got bullets flying in all directions here on this topic.
Well, I got a little familiarity with it, and I think you also remember last year. I forget the record, but Malik Neighbors was like 2 or 3 catches from setting the record at LSU when they took on Wisconsin in the Quest Bowl or whatever the bowl name was back then. And I was on the sideline, and I watched him play the first half, and he came out in the second half in street clothes, and I was like, what happened? He's like, that was always the plan. He wanted to play the first half. Everybody agreed he was going to play the first half, get the record, and then he was going to set out the second half and let some of the young guys play. So I'm fine with that. Everybody gets in an uproar because Miami is in a close game and Miami loses the game. Cam Ward went out, and what people don't realize is he had to go through all the bowl practices. He had to do everything that all the rest of the guys do. He went out and played the first half, and he put up almost, 30 points. And from what I understand, it was a decision between he and Cristobal. Hey, play the first half. Let's see where we are. I'd like to get the young guys some reps, while at the same time, I appreciate what you're doing, but we don't need you to play the entire game. We don't need to get you hurt. We appreciate what you've done for the program, blah, blah, blah. And so I think they had an understanding of what was going to happen, and I'm cool with that. I'm fine with that because of the effort and the sacrifice that he made of the bowl practices and being prepared and playing and all that good stuff. I'm fine with it because I've seen several other guys just not do any of that. And when the season's over, they throw the deuces. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. Every situation is personal because these dudes are trying to go make a ton of money on the professional level, especially Cam Ward, who's going to be a top 5 pick, I think. So I'm fine with it. I really don't honestly see the other side, Russillo. Like the other side is, well, he quit on his team. No, he didn't. He didn't quit. And so that's where I am on this. And maybe you see it a different way.
Look, I am on the kid's side almost all the time. All right. Like, even if I don't love how absurd some of the transfer stuff can be, or, we had this weird, the NCAA actually, in a way, was like with the COVID thing being like, let's just do what's best for the kid, even if we have a weird stretch of like guys getting eligibility for 8th year, because even Sark and the JUCO rule that they have now, I think the NCAA, although they don't want to share any of their money, they've done a lot of things to maximize the experience between NIL transfer rules and, a few other smaller things there. And it's long overdue. And these kids are getting screwed for so long. You're never really going to find me. And I've even had to like get out of some outdated thoughts that I would have that I was just married to when I was younger. Right.
Right.
That the brand is Saturday night. The brand isn't the player. And then it's like, all right, whatever. I stopped saying that one years and years ago. I guess it just kind of comes down to your personality with your teammates and that kind of stuff of like, could you do that to your teammates? And I think that's a very personal thing. But I also think that if you look at this generation of college football players, like I remember talking to the Oregon guys years ago, and it wasn't Chip Kelly, for those trying to guess. It was like, guys are disappointed we're playing in the Rose Bowl. Okay. Like, think about that. Right?
Yeah.
Think about how, we grew up or our parents grew up and thinking the Rose Bowl was the biggest thing.
Yeah, the granddaddy.
Right? Yeah. And you had, flirtation with a national championship run. You lose a late game. You're not playing in the national championship. You're not in the BCS. You're not in the college. Oh, I guess I'll just play in the Rose Bowl now. And the kids have completely become desensitized to bowl games meaning anything, even bowl games that still, in theory, should mean a lot. And granted, we're on a third system now. So to tell a kid, and it makes it even worse that it was named the Pop-Tart Bowl. It just does. To tell a bunch of kids, like, I bet you all of his teammates were cool with it. Because I think the guys that want to go out there and play some football because they love playing football are fine with it. And then the other guys, I think there's just a lot of indifference in that it's such a letdown. We prioritize a national championship over some of these, college football was always cool in a way that you could it's almost like the Final Four. Like you can make a Final Four run, not win the national championship, and still really be proud of that Final Four appearance and hang that banner. And maybe you don't even have a national championship, but it was awesome for your program, the school, and the fans, and all those things. I hope that's never devalued. But the winning of these bowl games outside of the playoff format is so devalued. I think they probably could have communicated it a little bit better. But I know at first I was like, what did he do? I'm like, for a record. And then it kind of bothered me. And then I thought a little bit more about it, Booger. And I just went, you know what? Remember, like this generation of college football players puts absolutely no value on a lot of these games because we've kind of told them they don't mean anything.
I've heard this take as well. Someone said, I would feel better if he just didn't play at all and had opted out. Or would you feel better or any different had he just said, you know what, I'm not playing in the bowl game and I showed up?
I would have felt a little bit better about that.
Okay.
You feel better that he went through all the practice and did all the stuff, prepared with the team, and then didn't. So you were cool with Neighbors last year? You were like,
yeah, I was cool with it because understand this is that and maybe this is where I come from. Like, you've given me 2-3 years, whatever the number is. You've given me all season long. Some cases, it depends on transfer portal. Like, you've given me a ton of time. Cam Ward gave you all season long. Cam Ward gave you, he was everything for this Miami offense. And in a day and age where he's going to be maybe at worst the second quarterback taken, he could be somewhere with John Beck or Jordan Palmer already preparing to throw in the combine. He said, nope, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stay in Coral Gables, and I'm practicing football for 15 practices. We're going to the Pop-Tart Bowl. I'm going to see Cole Kublik walk around with a damn Pop-Tart suit on and try to interview people. And I'm going to come out, and I'm going to play in the first half. And I'm not just back there taking snaps. He's playing football. Like, he's throwing the football around, running. Like, he's not just catching and throwing. He's actually playing. I was cool with that. I would have felt different if he would have said, you know what, I'm out throwing the deuces. That would have made me feel worse. So I'm on that side of the camp.
Yeah, I guess if you're out there and you're sitting there and being like, oh, I don't want to expose myself to injury. Well, you already did for the first half. So, why not just finish? I guess I would just, but again, nobody cares what I had to say. I didn't play like you guys. I guess there's just a certain part of me that wonders, like, you were just fine. It's not that, but this falls into the category of like the things I love and the things I despise. This is not in either of those categories. If I don't like something, I try to remind myself of the mindset of a younger player. And this has been going on for a long time. Like, it, you talk to these coaches and everything. Like, it's tough to get dudes to be fired up about these secondary bowl games here. Because even though it's on TV and everything, like, everything's on TV. Nobody. So, all right. I like how we talked about that. Because you know what I do like about you, though, is that I think there's way too much former player that is pro player on literally everything. Like, a player can never do anything wrong. And if you're in that business, if you're in that world of content, like, I'm just not interested in what you're going to have to say because I already know that you're going to say it. I opened the pod today talking some NFL, talking some Vikings, where this is twice now against Green Bay, where they were clearly the better football team. I thought the first game was actually better because there were so many mistakes that Green Bay could point to. And then they make the late rally. I thought Minnesota kicked their ass for 50 minutes. You get the late scores. It looks like a close game moving on. But in a game where I thought Green Bay could get them and would add cloudiness to what the NFC picture is, I feel like I have clarity because of this matchup, because of probably preferring Darnold over Hurts, and the fact that Detroit has this many injuries. If Minnesota gets the 1 seed, I think they're winning the NFC.
I'm going to disagree with that. Realizing from this point going forward, if these teams are what they are, and here's what I mean by that. I don't think Hutch is playing for Detroit. Obviously not. I think Anzalone may be back. He's not back yet. So Detroit is going to be limited defensively. Detroit probably I think they have the best offense because of the guy calling the plays in Ben Johnson and because of just their weapons. I just like what they do. Minnesota, and maybe I'm in a different camp. I think we've undervalued Minnesota all season long because we've been waiting on Darnold. There's an old saying, water eventually finds its level. And I think when Darnold threw the 5 picks against Jacksonville, everybody was like, there it is. Sam Darnold back again, but he came back, and the rest of the season has been outstanding. And I think he's earned the right to get a 5-year, $250 million deal, whatever the number is. Like, he's earned to be the franchise quarterback in Minnesota. If Philadelphia plays at their best, their defense is as good as Minnesota's defense, although they do it differently. Minnesota's kind of feast or famine with how Flores brings the pressure and how he blitzes. I don't think Minnesota's secondary is great if you're going to rely on Gilmore, and he's a little longer than tooth. I think if all these teams are kind of what they can be at this point, I would rank them like this. I would rank them Philadelphia, Minnesota, and Detroit only because of their health on defense. Detroit's defense scares me. Like, Terry Arnold is a pass interference waiting to happen. Carlton Davis, I don't know what his health is going to be like. Like, they're just so beat up defensively. Like, I mean, he is just, like, seriously, he's a pass interference waiting to happen.
Hey, Booger, when I'll look at some of the practice squad promotion stuff or signing or whatever, when I saw Jamal Adams was active and like getting snaps, I went, they're in trouble.
He was active and was playing linebacker. Like,
yeah.
Like, what are we doing? I think the NFC Championship game, if you, and I hadn't looked at the bracket, so if I'm saying something that can't happen, forgive me. I think the bracket really should be, like, if you gave me an NFC Championship game of Philly and Minnesota, I feel pretty good about that. I think those are the two best teams. I think one's going to be, and get, I think Green Bay, I haven't looked at the seeding. Like, Green Bay can only be 7, right? Philly's 2. Philly's locked into 2. Am I correct?
Yeah. So right now, Minnesota, granted, we still have Detroit to go tonight. You've got the head-to-head. So there's still a lot that could change here. But like, as it sits today, let's just do that exercise. I mean, Philly, Green Bay being your first wild card matchup, like, that just, not only is it potentially getting Goff outside, because that Philadelphia thing's lurking in some kind of whole field there. But I mean, that's the 2-3. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, imagine going 14-3 and playing Green Bay in a wild card game, because right now Washington has the tiebreaker over them because of a better conference record game.
One of those teams, if Tampa wins, one of those teams is going to have to go to Tampa, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it honestly wouldn't surprise me. In January, it's going to be, in 2 weeks, I promise you, because I'm outside now, it's going to be 85 degrees, all right, in Tampa, Baker Mayfield. The Bucs got just enough that they can scare the heck out of one of those teams that's won 13 or 14 games.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be Detroit right now on the 4-5.
And the Bucs have already beat Detroit in Detroit.
Yeah, that was a really weird one, though. I'll just point out, like, that was a disastrous red zone day for Detroit offense. Like, they're not going to do that to them again. There's other times in Tampa in the playoffs where I like them because of a matchup thing. If they play Detroit and people go based on that, that was such an anomaly. But, I actually want to give Tampa some love here, because when you start looking at their offensive stats and their scoring and how they kept this thing going, I might have been more impressed with their loss against the Niners and getting back in that game than even some of their wins. So yeah. I know you're an alum there. Can you make a case for Tampa getting through the NFC?
I can make a case for them winning a game and competing in a second game. Their offensive line is really young, athletic. They can run the football. This kid, Bucky Irving, he's a really poor man's. Like, when you start looking at the backs that are 3-down backs, like, he's that type of guy. I think yesterday he had 120 rushing, another 80 receiving, almost 200 yards all purpose as far as offense yesterday. Mike Evans is a Hall of Fame receiver. The key for Tampa is always this. Now that Godwin is out with the ACL, what do you get from McMillan? What do you get from these other ancillary pieces? Cade Otton has had a really good year. What are you going to get from the pass-catching threats not named Mike Evans? That's the issue for Tampa. And defensively, can Todd Bowles scheme up enough defenses to get off on third down? Because Baker has been pretty, outside of a game or two, he's been pretty consistent. Yeah, man. I mean, the Bucs are just, like I said, they're just good enough to scare you.
That offense is remarkable. Like, when you look at where they're at statistically, I think it's scoring number 2 in the NFC, maybe number 5. Maybe it was number 5 going into the week. But there's just some nice reminders there, considering the challenge that they faced, like a lot of other teams with health and all that kind of stuff. And then Evans just beasting guys. He's still making that big brother catch in the end zone where he just embarrasses you with the way he catches it and just holds the ball away from you. And I mean, that guy's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. He should, because the continued production the entire way through. All right, last thing for you here. Before we let you go, your MVP would be who?
I've gone back and forth. To me, there are three candidates. It's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Saquon Barkley. And it's I've been prisoner of the moment after Josh had one of those crazy performances. Josh Allen. If you look at the statistics, Lamar Jackson is having a better year this year than he had in either one of the two MVPs that he's already won. And Saquon Barkley is only the ninth guy to go over 2K. If you told me today to make a vote, I'd probably go Josh Allen. I fall into the camp of when you're doing something that we haven't seen you do before. Like Lamar, his numbers are better, but we've seen him do this before. Josh Allen is doing it, and he's not turning the football over, Russillo. That's been the knock on Josh Allen. He turns the ball over too much. He's not turning. He's got 6 turnovers all season, 6. And so I would probably vote Josh, Lamar, Saquon, and I realize I'm being a prisoner of this being a quarterback award. And if you ask me tomorrow or after the regular season finale, it may change, but that's where I go today.
Yeah, look, I think the last thing with Josh was, those backed up interceptions where it's 1st and 10 and he just throws a dangerous ball and they're on their own 20 and it's the second quarter and you go, you don't need it. I'm actually enjoying Brady on the broadcast. Like the Darnold interception yesterday, you can just see he's sick because Brady doesn't throw that pick. Like he's just not giving you the ball back there. And Brady's talking about how much he's enjoying Darnold and all this stuff. And then you just like, I wouldn't throw that pick. Like I wouldn't throw that pick. And I think Allen still had that in him. And then there was the red zone stuff. We get into the elbow injury and all those different things. And he's just not doing it. So like it was the last level of whatever the video game was for Josh Allen quarterbacking. And he's mastered the game this year. Where if you look at Lamar's picks, I think you could argue he should only have, well, maybe there's some that are dropped in there too. I don't know off the top of my head. But when he had 3 before he got the 4th, that was bad against Pittsburgh. The first 3 that he had on the
none
books,
of them were his fault.
None of them. Like ridiculous things that were happening. So you could argue like the first real pick was just the Steelers game.
Yeah.
And I would love to come up with a new way to identify all these things. If Allen wins, I'm okay with it. I hope he doesn't win because people are like, it's his turn. Because Lamar's still doing probably the most valuable job.
But that's how this goes, though. Like
oh, no, you're right. You're right.
I mean, again, Shaq could have won the MVP. And now I'm getting to your wheelhouse. Shaq could have won the MVP every year. So could LeBron. Like, I mean, but at some point, we're going to come up with reasons to give it to other people. Hey, Russell Westbrook, the triple-double. Let's give it to him.
That was a mistake.
He averaged a triple-double the next year. Nobody even brought his name up. Like, come on, man. Think about that. Think about it. We gave him an MVP because he averaged a triple-double. He averaged one the next year, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, and we never even brought his name up.
It was like 4 straight years. I mean, the other part that people lost their mind, the Thunder won 47 games that year. So they were the 7 seed? Yeah. 6 seed. Yeah, they were the 6 seed. That had a lot to do with Durant leaving, Westbrook staying, falling in love with the idea that Westbrook was the conquering hero staying at home. And people did not look at the usage rate. So,
and by the way, I know we're wrapping this up. NBA MVP right now, is it anybody other than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now? And I think, and the reason I say that is because a lot of people thought he should have won it last year, and he's having as good a year this year. So right now, if the season were to end today, and I realize we're early, is it anybody other than him?
Yeah, it's going to be hard to argue Jokic is 17 and 13. People that had SGA 1 last year were wrong. But yeah, I think it's SGA. And look, the SGA is going to win on the record thing because basketball, that's what happens. But like, I'm just happy that in the cup, and it's not an anti-SGA knock because he loses it in that game, but just a reminder of who Giannis is. Just a reminder of like when I voted Giannis second last year, that was pretty rare.
Right.
Like people were already on to SGA. They were already on to everything else. If you have SGA second last year, I'm not going to get super mad about it. If you had him number 1, I think you're wrong. But their record is nuts. Like I watched, what was it, the Memphis game last night, Booger? If you wait around to do your thing offensively against OKC, they're going to swarm you and they're going to screw you up. You cannot. I've watched it so many times this season with their defense where they must be just a joy to coach because the message just gets through to every single guy that checks in. It's like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do to disrupt it. And as good as Jalen Williams is offensively, and there's some really good on-ball creation, a lot of it comes back to SGA, and it's such a hard role. You saw it with Booker without Durant and Beal and how much his efficiency dropped off because it was just left to him. It's happened to Ant basically nightly, even with Randall's numbers. You know what they're going to try to go to. It's happening to Steph. I think some of their clutch losses have a lot more to do with him just trying to do the impossible and carry it with such a significant drop-off to who the number 2 guy is. It's not as significant for SGA, but there are certain possessions where it's within what they're trying to do, and then a lot where it ends up back with him, like the Pacers win at the end of last week, where he hits that 3 where the Pacers were really good defensively. He just had to make it happen. So it feels like SGA with the record and the statistical profile, it's his right now, but I still would expect with Denver being healthier that Jokic can get back in this.
I got you.
Was that good?
Yeah, that's good stuff.
You were like, okay, dude, that was a little longer than I wanted to be. You're the best, buddy. Enjoy the new year. We'll talk soon.
All right, later, man.